One of the important lessons we need to grasp in the Gospels is that the Gospels are not a haphazard collection of stories about Jesus. Context is vital for us to understand what actually is going on. At the beginning of chapter 11, John the Baptist has asked the question if he, Jesus, is the Messiah, the one that they are looking for, the one that they are, in fact, longing for. And immediately before this passage, that is in chapter 11, 25 to 30, Jesus passes judgment on various cities and thereby the people, and in fact the rulers and the nation. His condemnation comes about because they do not recognize him, a bit like John the Baptist at the beginning of the chapter. I really feel for the Baptist. He is in prison after all, and he is really wondering if he's backed the right horse. It's a natural human instinct that we want our lives to mean something. All that we have done has had a purpose, especially if we're about to lose our lives for what we thought was the purpose, the why. Now this is going to seem a bit strange, but I'll say it anyways. It's almost as if Jesus has a moment of clarity. The Father's way is not the world's way. The Father has turned everything upside down. This is evident in Luke, in the Magnificat, from the words of Mary. He has scattered the proud in the imagination of their hearts. He has put down the mighty from their thrones. He has exalted the humble and meek. With these words of Mary, she encapsulates what is going on for Jesus here in chapter 11 in Matthew. The wise of the world, those who think they know everything, have shown themselves to know nothing. Well, at least nothing of anything that really matters. Knowing God and his purpose for our lives, that's what ultimately matters. Some commentators feel that this passage is not about the wise being ignorant, but that the little people knew. Brunner, in his commentary, makes the observation that the world's response to Jesus is that he anguishes, but the Father's sovereignty is a source of great encouragement for him. I think this is an important lesson for us. We can anguish over the world's response to God, to the way the world seems to be going, the uncertainty, the tension in the world, and we can anguish over it, especially in this time of pandemic. Or we can acknowledge the sovereignty of God, even though it doesn't look like God's in charge. Look at the cross. Who is in charge there? Now, if you were there on the day, you would have to say, well, the Romans. But Jesus knew that the Father was in charge. And so, even though he cries that cry of dereliction, it is still one of hope. Into your hands I commend my spirit. The rationale for this realization that Jesus enters into is his recognition that the world really does not know him or the Father. The world tries to understand God, but it is impossible except through the lens of Jesus. Martin Luther, in his exhortation to his students, not to try to climb into heaven to see what God's looks like, but he encouraged them to hang on to the man Jesus, for he is all that we have. Bishop Tom Wright often says, if you want to know what God is like, look long and lovingly at Jesus. The stark truth about our faith is that God's whole truth has been placed in and revealed through the Son, Jesus. The key to divine revelation is Jesus. You want to know what God is like? Well, don't go looking for God, look for Jesus. This reality of the divine revelation in and through Jesus is the catalyst for the invitation by him, come to me. Jesus does not say to us, come to God. He says, come to me. You want to know what is true? Come to Jesus. You want to know what the meaning of life is? Come to Jesus. You want to know the answers to the world's problems? Come to Jesus. So who are the heavy burdened? Who are the ones who are laden down? Well, the ones who are struggling with life, the ones who are carrying too much baggage from their lives. I think we forget that life is not benign. In the movie Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, they're on a quest to get to the underworld. I won't tell you why, that just would spoil the surprise for you. Percy, if you don't know the story, is the son of Poseidon, living in the 21st century. They find the entry to Hades under the Hollywood sign. Where else would you find the entrance to Hades except under the Hollywood sign? And as they are punting across to the home of Hades, they see all this debris and detritus. And the ferryman tells them that this is the detritus, the debris of human existence. Loss, lost opportunities, sadness, the outcome of a pointless life. We carry in our bodies the multitude of scars from lost opportunities, sadness, disappointment, rejection, loss. However, our lives are not pointless if they are lived in the reality and hope of Jesus. Coming to Jesus does not mean we will never have loss in our lives again, that we will never have burdens again, that we will not have complication in our lives again. The invitation to come to Jesus is so that we can be yoked to him. When I was the rector of Warwicknabeal, there were 5 chain roads and there were 1 chain roads. The 1 chain roads generally ran north-south and the 5 chain ones east and west. I asked the question, why is this so? Well, it's because the oxen teams carrying the goods and produce generally travelled east and west, and you needed 5 chain between the fences to turn an oxen team around. Bit of useless information. Don't say I don't do nothing for you. They went on to explain to me that when you were training a team, you yoked each pair together and sent them out into the bush so they could get used to one another. They had to learn to operate as a 2-ox team. St. Paul understood this. After his conversion came the so-called hidden years, maybe up to 7 years. He was being yoked to Christ as he learnt to be a servant of the risen Jesus. The disciples were yoked to Christ in their apprenticeship, and we need to be yoked as well. The interesting thing about being yoked is that the burden is not lifted, it is lessened. What might be unbearable for one is suddenly bearable for 2. Paul speaks about this in Galatians. Bear one another's burdens. Why? Because it makes it easier. A problem shared is a problem halved. 2 heads are better than 1. Jesus here invites the one who is having a hard time, who is feeling overwhelmed. It is the needy he is in search of, the one sheep who has gone astray, the poor in spirit, the one who says, "Be merciful to me, a sinner." These are the poor in the Magnificat, who are being lifted up. These are the ones, the poor in spirit, who will inherit the kingdom of God. Those who are like the Pharisee in Luke 18, who were proud that they were Pharisees and not like the rotten tax collector at the back of the temple, they have no need for God. They might know of him, but they do not know him. People like the tax collector in that story in Luke 18 recognize their need before God, and having no pride, no self-esteem to be dented, are willing to humble themselves before God and recognize they do not have the answers. Only God, in and through his Son Jesus, has the answers. The final statement in verse 29 and 30 by Jesus is just quite amazing. You will find refreshment for your soul, for my burden is easy, my yoke is light. The soul, or psyche, is what is in view here. We think of the soul or psyche as something separate from our physical being. However, this is a Platonic dualism that is not biblical. The Bible speaks of us being ensouled beings. Our life is not physical and spiritual as separate entities, but are a union of the physical and the spiritual as one. When we die, we do not leave behind our body so that our soul is free and finally liberated to join with God. That is Gnosticism. It's a heresy. The New Testament understanding of soul stands over and against death, for the psyche or the soul is the principle of life. This life needs nourishment, and that nourishment comes only through a relationship with the Lord Jesus. Our bodies, the soma, are restricted to this natural life, But our psyche or our soul is our whole life, which includes the physical, includes the soma. Resurrection is physical because the physical is part of our psyche. It is simply a resurrection of a body that is animated by the Spirit and not by nature. See 1 Corinthians chapter 15. But here is the problem. If we yoke ourselves to the world, what happens is that we get the true life, our psyche, drained, exhausted, because the world is not interested in our true refreshment or peace, or our desires, or even about us, just whatever the world can get out of us. On the other hand, if we yoke ourselves to Jesus, we still live in the world. That is a given. We still will have the issues of the world. That too is a given. However, what we will have as the ace up our sleeve, if you like, is that when we are yoked to Jesus, he is able to take on himself what we can't. It doesn't mean that we have no burden, but now we have a burden that we can cope with. Do you want to be refreshed? You will not find it in the refreshment ways of the world. They are usually sensate dulling measures. Yeah, we can go on holiday, but what about the rest of the time that you're not on holiday? Yeah, we can go to a nightclub and let off steam, but then what? Still the next day and the ensuing hangover. Yeah, you can read a book or walk on the beach. All these will help for a short period of time, and then you are back to reality. Do you want to find true refreshment? Refreshment that will go on and on and on? Refreshment that is not periodical? Then yoke yourselves to Jesus. Immerse yourselves in his life, and your life will be that much better. When you have the inevitable conflict, when we have the inevitable hard time, when we have the inevitable whatever that has the potential to overwhelm us, then we need to yoke ourselves to Jesus. The invitation to us by Jesus to come to him is an invitation that comes out of a deep understanding of our human condition and a deep understanding of the remedy for it. Each of us need to take a good, hard look at our lives. Are we really content with it? Are we content, or have we simply settled for second best because we think that this is as good as it's ever going to get? God truly knows us, for he has created us in his image and likeness and desires each and every one of us to live sustainable lives. He recognizes that because of our human condition, this is just not possible. And so he has sent his Son Jesus of Nazareth to reveal to us the Father's true heart and to give each and every one of us an opportunity to know the Father through the Son. So won't you come to Jesus and come to have revealed to you the Father's heart through the Son, and come and be yoked with Jesus rather than the world, so that you and me and all of us may live more sustainably in the world, that we may make things so difficult for ourselves, but we don't have to, for the yoke of Jesus is easy and the burden is light. And when we do this, when we yoke ourselves to Jesus, we will find true refreshment and true nourishment for our lives. The Lord be with you.